vinyl friends and vinyl community. It's Brian from Brian's Vinyl Records, and I am jumping on a thread that I've seen here in the VC. I saw it from Rod the Happy Hippie and Hannah at the Omaha Introvert, and it is the A to Z bands that you are your favorites from A to Z. So a band from each letter that you would consider your favorite. So a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. This was pretty difficult to make some decisions on certain letters and other ones where you just maybe didn't have a favorite in that letter or maybe didn't have anything at all. So let's get into it. We'll start with the letter A, and this is an easy, obvious choice from me. AC/DC is my favorite band of all time, and so going with AC/DC for A, no brainer there for me. For B, this is tough, man. You got all sorts of great bands that start with B. Black Sabbath, you've got Bon Jovi, you've got the Beatles. But I decided to go with my favorite band today and that is Blackberry Smoke. I can't say enough good things about this band. They are just amazing. So Blackberry Smoke gets B for me. For the letter C, another one that was difficult to choose, but I'm going with my man Eric Clapton. I love Eric Clapton, and he's probably one of the best guitar players ever, so I gotta go with Clapton for C. Letter D, this is someone I wasn't ever really much into until recently, but I'm going with Bob Dylan. Just amazing songwriter, and I've really started getting into his music over the last year and a half or two, and love it. So Bob Dylan, local boy. For E, had a hard time here because I don't have a whole lot of albums from bands with E. I could have gone like with Everclear or bands like Every Mother's Nightmare, but I decided to go with a classic, and that is the Eagles. Just one of the all-time great bands. So the Eagles for E. For F, I chose Firehouse. These guys were huge for me in my high school years and part of my college years. I just absolutely love this band. I've seen them live probably 6 or 7 times, and every time I see them, they're just absolutely amazing. So I'm going with Firehouse for F. For G, another easy one for me, Guns N' Roses. Love Guns N' Roses, and this album is probably my favorite of theirs. For the letter H, I went with George Harrison. So I could have gone with something like Hootie and the Blowfish or something like that, but I chose George Harrison. As I've gotten into a lot of the solo Beatle works, his music has probably become my favorite of the solo works from the Beatles. So love for George Harrison there. For letter I, probably my favorite songwriter right now, Jason Isbell. Just absolutely fantastic music, great songwriting, great storytelling. Love it. So Jason Isbell for I. For the letter J, my first concert and my first real favorite artist, Michael Jackson. I don't know, just loved Michael Jackson's music. For letter K, had a hard time deciding on this, but I went with Kiss. I really got into Kiss probably at the end of my college years. Started really getting into them. I had listened to them before, but never really was a big, huge fan. Started buying up all their albums from used CD stores, and then as I got into vinyl, I started buying their albums for that as well. So really enjoy Kiss. So K is Kiss. For L, had a hard time with this one, finding bands that I liked that had L. I could have gone with Led Zeppelin, but again, I didn't really get into Led Zeppelin until I started collecting vinyl, so it wouldn't be really true to say that they're my favorites. But I went with Miranda Lambert. This is her latest album, and it's fantastic. And I really got into her probably about 4 or 5 years ago. So Miranda Lambert for L. M, so many great bands with the letter M. Metallica, Motley Crue, just tons. But I went with my favorite, Megadeth. Love Megadeth. They are my favorite thrash band, and so going with that. N, I'm gonna go with 2 here, but I want to show this one. This is New Kids on the Block. These guys were in my middle school years probably my favorite band going, which wasn't something you admitted to back in those days. So I really still enjoy listening to their music. But For this, I'm choosing this guy here, Willie Nelson. Another artist I never really got into until I started collecting vinyl. I found a few of his albums for warehouse deals on Amazon, picked them up, absolutely loved them. They were his newer albums, and started collecting his back catalog too, which is huge. So I don't have a ton, but everything I've listened to of his I've really enjoyed, and the production quality has been fantastic. So Willie Nelson gets the N for me. O goes to Ozzy Osbourne. Great artist. Love it. P, one of my favorite bands of all time, Poison. Q was very difficult. Q, I don't really have a whole lot of bands I would say are my favorites in, and I don't have a whole lot of albums that artists start with letter Q. I could have gone Queen, but that would be disingenuous because honestly, I don't listen to a lot of Queen. I have the Bohemian Rhapsody soundtrack, and that's it from them, and that's probably all I need from them. It has all their hits. So I decided to go with a band that I just started listening to a lot recently, and I actually listened to in high school as well, but that would be Queensryche. So I'm using Queensryche for Q. R I had a difficult time with as well. Just not a lot of R artists that I have that stood out as could be my favorites. I do want to mention these guys. This is, oh, that's terrible, Rhino Bucket. These guys are a band that I fell in love with in the 90s. They sound a lot like Bon Scott era AC/DC, and I loved that about them. And I got real big into them after the Wayne's World soundtrack came out, and they had a song on there, and I started buying their albums. And sadly, this is the only one that I can find that I own. I had their first two albums on cassette. I have their first one on cassette still, somewhere in my cassette mix up there, and then this is the only one I have on CD, which is their third album. My favorite of theirs is their second album called Get Used to It. The first and second albums are probably number 1 and 2 after Motley Crue on my most wanted list for vinyl. But I went with this artist as my favorite for R, LeAnn Rimes. I absolutely adore her voice, love her music, and she, when this album came out, my whole family became a huge fan of hers, and her second album is probably my favorite of hers, Sitting on Top of the World. Fantastic album. Wish they would put that on vinyl as well. But LeAnn Rimes gets R. S, man, so many bands in S. Scorpions, Skid Row, Slaughter. Geez, there's just a ton of S bands that I absolutely love. Silverchair, Smashing Pumpkins, list goes on and on. Soundgarden. But I decided to go with the person that got me back into one of my favorite things to do, and that's songwriting. I had not written a song in many years, and I heard this artist and thought, my God, if a 16-year-old can write like that, I need to get back into writing again. She inspired me to start writing again. I'm going with Taylor Swift, one of my all-time favorite artists as well. Just every album she puts out, I think it gets better and better each time. So Taylor Swift gets the S for me. T goes to Type O Negative. Man, what can I say about Type O Negative? I went to the 1994 Motley Crue concert with John Corabi on vocals to see them in concert. These guys opened for Motley Crue. Never heard of them before, and they blew me away. It was unbelievable. So good. So I became a fan instantly that day, bought their current album the next day, and have been buying them ever since. And this is from their box set. This is October Rust. Absolutely fantastic album. Great band. Letter U, I went with Keith Urban. It was a toss-up between Keith and Carrie Underwood. I decided to go with Keith because I've really been getting into a lot of his stuff over the last 2 years, and I think he's just an absolutely phenomenal guitar player, excellent songwriter, and a great singer. So I went with Keith Urban. I'll absolutely become a huge fan of his. The letter V goes to Van Halen. I don't know if I could choose anyone else in the letter V. So Van Halen gets the nod. Love Van Hagar era. Love David Lee Roth era. So Van Halen for me, no doubt. W, I'm going with Warrant for W. Absolutely loved Warrant in high school, middle school, and followed them all the way to 96-ish, 97, 98, and kind of lost track of them. Saw them live with Robert Mason on vocals a few years back now at a festival, and they were absolutely fantastic. Still had it. Love Janie Lane's vocals, and these guys are I just absolutely love this band. So Warrant gets a W. That brings us to X. I don't own anything in my catalog on CD, cassette, vinyl with a band that starts with X. I can only think of a couple bands off the top of my head that even start with X, and I don't think I've ever really listened to any of them. So I got nothing for X. But I do want to mention one more in W. I'm going to put out Brooke White here. This is her latest album. She was on American Idol in season 7, and I absolutely fell in love with her at that point and have followed her career ever since. I bought her first debut album. I bought her album before she was on American Idol on CD. I bought all of the stuff she did with almost all the stuff she did with Jack and White, which was a band she formed. And this was a no-brainer when it was announced. I bought this right away when it came out. This is her latest album, Calico, came out last year. It is fantastic. Love Brooke White. So that means we go to Y. This is a favorite of my wife and I's. This is Trisha Yearwood. We just love Trisha Yearwood. In college, we would drive back and forth from college to home almost every weekend to hang out with our families, and country music was the backdrop to a lot of those drives, and Trisha Yearwood was huge in those drives as well. So Trisha Yearwood gets our Y, and that leaves Z. Not a whole lot of options for me to choose for Z, and so I just went with de facto here, and we'll go with ZZ Top. So there you go. A to Z. I had one for everything but the letter X, so I took 2 W's instead. Hope you enjoyed this video. It's kind of a fun thread. It's not easy to do, so I do recommend taking some time and really thinking about it, because there's so many different bands and different letters that you could choose, and it's hard to narrow them down and just pick one. So that might be my list for now. It might change, in a couple weeks to something else. Who knows? But that's what I have for now. I hope you like this. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to, please leave a comment below and interact with me. I'd love to hear from you. And jump on the thread, guys. This is a VC thread going around. I'm not sure who started it, but I did notice it from Rod, the Happy Hippie. And I saw that Hannah, the Omaha Introvert, also did a video. And I'll check around. I think David Newton has also done this. So check them all out and jump on the thread. It's kind of a fun thing to do. And now I got to go put all these back in the shelves. That's going to be a joy, right? Awesome. Thanks for watching. Check out my podcast, Brian's Vinyl Records, on all your podcast apps. Check out my website, briansvinylrecords.com, where you can see the most recent upcoming new releases if you're interested to see what's coming out in the next several months. I have as many of those as I can find out there, so check that out. Check out my Instagram and Facebook page, Brian's Vinyl Records, on those, and that'll show you what I'm posting and listening to throughout the day if you're interested in following that. Thanks for watching, and until next time, keep spinning vinyl, friends.